We all embody all parts. Human beings, if you're really going to wake up to yourself, you are everything. You sometimes avoid, you're sometimes fearful, sometimes you perpetrate, sometimes you invade people's boundaries, sometimes you isolate, sometimes you're passive aggressive, sometimes you're snarky, sometimes you're impatient and bitchy. Sometimes, I mean, like you can be super violent and you can be really gentle and dignified. Like you play all parts. So first of all, there is nothing to defend. There is nothing to defend and there's nothing to prove. So that's one of the places that we actually can find our power again. And in this situation, I want to get really grounded in what do I care about? What am I caring about and loving? And I want to lead from that place. Okay, you don't chase and you don't sell. Okay, when we're nonviolent, we don't chase and we don't sell, we radiate. Okay, we radiate. And in order to radiate, we want to get really clear on the goodness of who we are. And part of the goodness of who we are is that we are non-defensive. We are willing to look at anything we've done that might have been harmful or might have had an impact. When you tell me, Yvette, you're such a narcissistic bitch, I can be like, okay, let me find the part of me where that might be true. And I also trust my own authority to know whether that was, in fact, I was being a narcissistic bitch with you in this way. And oh yeah, that piece is mine. Or whether I really wasn't. And you're projecting that on me. But I'm going to have anxiety about that to the degree that I don't know myself. Okay, to the degree, and also to the degree that I judge myself or don't accept myself. So some of that then points inward again to how are we doing with self-abandonment? How are we doing with self-acceptance? How are we doing with self-trust? How are we doing with really grounding ourselves in what is good about us? And that can often be a practice. You get to be scared and you get to be anxious and you get to care. There's also nothing wrong with you with caring about what they think about you, Just work with those parts of you as lovingly and gently as you can. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So in internal family systems, which is Dick Schwartz's work, there are parts of us that we've exiled, and then there are like the protective parts and the exiled parts and the management parts. And, you've developed different aspects of your psyche, some that you've disowned because they're bad and you think they shouldn't be a part of you, and others that are very protective and part of your sort of psychological immune system, and others that have learned to fit in and adapt and cope with the world as it is. And these different aspects of our psyche can be making decisions at different times. So that's one way we can work with parts, is to get to know the role and function. Another way you can work with parts is through archetypal work. So some people prefer more of the transpersonal way of working with things. So through archetypes, Carolyn Meese, for example, talks about the 4 primary archetypes. And just to kind of get a sense of the energies that can move through you and that you might be in as you're navigating your inner being, interacting with other inner beings. Now, the path of nonviolence is the path of loving everything, of understanding that everything fits and that everything has a function. And that, so in nonviolent communication, we sometimes talk about the journey from control to connection. And one of the ways you can understand that journey is that the part of you that wants to seek control over everything tends to be your protective parts. They tend to be your fight-flight system. They tend to be the parts of you that are more fear-based and survival-based. Another way to think about that is they're the first 3 chakras. If you're into the chakra system, your first 3 chakras are of the manifest world, and they will be control-based. They want to scan the environment for what is dangerous, like this ex having a bad opinion of me, my psyche would think of as dangerous and would see a threat, and then wants to control their perceptions by showing up in particular ways, sometimes by having the right words and showing up in the right way, and then getting the approval of another. And then some younger part of us will have this sort of safety system that can relax if I have other people's approval. So we'll have this aspect in ourselves that is pretty dependent on the outside world liking us for our safety. And that is adaptive at a certain stage of development. And it's very maladaptive if you're wanting to become a mature grown-up, or you're wanting to become a co-creator, or you're really wanting to achieve your highest potential. If you want to achieve your highest potential as a human, then you have these invitations to grow out of the first three chakras that are about survival and control. And then we move into the fourth chakra, the heart chakra, and nonviolent communication is what I think of as a technology for opening the heart and bridging the controlling, protective, survival-based parts of ourselves with the courageous, connection-based, intimacy, trust, expansive way of being in the world. And there's a big grapple that then begins to happen because you start getting to know all of these parts inside of you and sort of wondering, wait, who's in charge? Who hijacks? When does my 3-year-old literally hijack the rest of my consciousness and follow the red flags? Because that's familiar and that's where home is. So I'm going to keep doing that thing. Right. And then when do my protective parts who get really narcissistic and self-righteous say, oh, nobody really understands me, and nobody can really influence me. And I am going to live in my bubble over here in my intellectual ivory tower where everything feels safe. Like you just start getting to know all of the ways that you relate with yourself and then with the world. So you want to find a way of loving up your parts, your bitchy parts, since that's the piece you're talking about. Your bitchy part is the part that is sort of reclaiming her voice very often. This is the part that says, you know what? I am sick and tired of being who the world needs me to be. And I am sick and tired of meeting your needs. And it is time for my needs. And she's a little bit like a bit of a fighter in me. She's got a little bit of a warrior spirit in me. And she over indexes a little bit on the one up and not the shared humanity, because she's got a little bit of scoldy, lectury, putting other people a little bit beneath her. I can care about, she's egocentric generally in me. You can decide how she is in you. That she'll sort of go to bat for me and lack care for the other in those moments. So you can get to know her, you can see how she helps you, and she can also see how she gets in your way. And then it always brings up the question of gets in the way for what? What are the deep values that you want to live into in your life? Because ultimately there is going to be something that is pulling you forward that your inner being is reaching for. And whatever that is, whether it is a world that works for all people, or the protection of life, or transformation to your highest capacity, or a world based on love and gentleness, or whatever it is, healing of trauma, you're going to have something that's pulling you forward. And the work is to get all of these parts in alignment with your deep vision for what it is that you're here to do. And once you start lining them up behind your vision, it becomes really clear how to use each of them and how to give them each a role and a place, and how they all serve you in some way, but for something higher. And until they have that, they tend to sort of pop up like whack-a-mole, sort of taking over, and it can be a little bit dysregulating because you're like, why this, why that? Is that who I am? But it does bring you back into the deep exploration of who am I really? And that becomes a spiritual existential question that I'm going to leave with you today.